Welcome to another story time with Shiningnathan, and we have a treat of a different type of story called The Last Incantation by Ashton Smith. Now, I'm looking forward to this. If you followed me here on TikTok, I'm glad you're here. If you found me organically, welcome. Now, you take a minute to go get your snacks, pause here to go get your snacks, get comfy, and we can get ready to the story. As always, turn on that notification bell, subscribe, and like and comment where you're watching this from. Now, let's get into this. Welcome to another story time with Shiningnathan, and we have a treat of a different type of story called The Last Incantation by Ashton Smith. Now, I'm looking forward to this. If you followed me here on TikTok, I'm glad you're here. If you found me organically, welcome. Now, you take a minute to go get your snacks, pause here to go get your snacks, get comfy, and we can get ready to the story. As always, turn on that notification bell, subscribe, and like and comment where you're watching this from. Now, let's get into this. Meleagris the magician sat in the topmost room of his tower that was builded on a conical hill above the heart of Susran, capital of Poseidnosis, wrought of dark stone mined from deep in the earth, perdurable and hard as the fabled adamant. This tower loomed above all others, and flung its shadow far on the roofs and domes of the city, even as the sinister power of Meleagris had thrown its darkness on the minds of men. Now Meleagris was old, and all the baleful might of his enchantments, all the dreadful or curious demons under his control, all the fear that he had wrought in the hearts of kings and prelates were no longer enough to assuage the black ennui of his days. In his chair that was fashioned from the ivory of Macedons, inset with the terrible cryptic runes of red tourmalines and azure crystals, he stared moodily through the one lozenge-shaped window of orange glass. His white eyebrows were contracted to a single line on the umber parchment of his face, and beneath them his eyes were cold and green as the ice of ancient flows. His beard, half white, half of a black with glacious gleams, fell nearly to his knees and hid many of the writhing serpentine characters inscribed in woven silver athwart the bosom of his velvet robe. About him were scattered all the appartements and accoutrements of his art. The skulls of men and monsters, phials filled with black and amber liquids whose sacrilegious use was known to none but himself. Little drums of vulture skin and the crotali made from the bones and teeth of the crocodile, used as an accompaniment to certain incantations. The mosaic floor was partly covered with the skins of enormous black and silver apes, and above the door there hung the head of a unicorn, in which dwelt the familiar demon of Meleagris, in the form of a coral viper with pale green belly and ashen motlins. Books were piled everywhere, ancient volumes bound in serpentine skin, with verdigris eaten clasp, that held the frightening lore of Atlantis, the pentacles that have power upon the demons of the earth and the moon, the spells that transmute or disintegrate the very elements, and the runes from a lost language of Hyperborea, which, when uttered aloud, were more deadly than any poison, or more potent than any philter. But though these things and the power they held or symbolized were the terror of the people and the envy of all rival magicians, the thoughts of Meleagris were dark with immitigable melancholy, and weariness filled his heart as ashes filled the hearth where a great fire had died. Immovable he sat, implacable he mused, while the sun of the afternoon, declining on the city and on the sea that was beyond the city, smote the autumnal rays through the window of greenish-yellow glass. and touched his shrunken hands with its phantom gold, and fired the blades of rubies of his rings till they burned like Dominion eyes. But in his musings there was neither light nor fire, and turning from the grayness of the present, from the darkness that seemed to close in so imminently upon the future, he groped among the shadows of memory, even as a blind man who has lost the sun and seeks it everywhere in vain, and all the vistas of time that had been so full of gold and splendor, the days of triumph that were colored like a soaring flame, with the crimson and purple of the rich imperial years of his prime, all these were chill and dim and strangely faded now, and the remembrance thereof was no more than the stirring of dead embers. Then Milagros groped backward to the years of his youth, to the misty, remote, incredible years where, like an alien star, one memory still burned with unfailing luster. The memory of the girl Nylissa, whom he had loved in days ere the lust of impertinent knowledge and necromantic dominion had ever entered his soul. He had well nigh forgotten her for decades and decades, the myriad preoccupations of a life so bizarrely diversified, so replete with occult happenings and powers, with supernatural victories and perils, and now, at the mere thought of this slender and innocent youth, who had loved him so dearly when he too was young and slim and guileless, and who had died of a mysterious fever on the very eve of their marriage day. The mummy-like umber of his cheeks took on a phantom flush, and deep down in the icy orbs was sparkled like the gleam of mortuary tapers. In his dreams arose the irretrievable sons of the youth, and he saw the myrtle-shaded valley of Morose and the stream Zymander, by whose ever-verdant marge he had walked at eventide with Mylissa, seeing the birth of summer stars in the heavens, the stream in the eyes of his beloved. Now, addressing the Dominion viper that dwelt in the head of the unicorn, Milagros spoke with low, monotonous intonation of one who thinks aloud. Viper, in the years before you came to dwell with me and to make your abode in the head of the unicorn, I knew a girl who was lovely and frail as the orchids of the jungle, and who died as the orchids die. Viper, am I not Milagros, in whom is centered the mastery of all occult lore, all forbidden domination, with dominion over the spirits of earth and sea and air, over the solar and lunar demons, over the living and the dead? If so I desire, can I not call the girl Nylissa, in the very semblance of all her youth and beauty, and bring her forth from never-ever changing shadows of the cryptic tomb to stand before me in this chamber, in the evening rays of this autumnal sun? Yes, master, replied the viper in a low but singularly pertinent hiss. You are Milagros, and all sorcerers or necromancer power is yours. All incantations and spells and pentacles are known to you. It is possible, if you so desire, to summon the girl Nylissa from her abode among the dead, and to behold her again as she was ere her loveliness had known the ravening kiss of the worm. Viper, is it meet that I should summon her thus, where there be nothing to lose and nothing to regret? The viper seemed to hesitate. Then, in a more slow and measured hiss, "It is meet for Milagros to do as he would. Who save for Milagros can decide if a thing be well or ill. In other words, you will not advise me." The query was much a statement as a question. The viper vouchsafed no further utterance. Milagros brooded for a while with his chin on his knotted hands. Then he arose, with a long, unwonted celebrity and shortness of movement that belied his wrinkles, and gathered together from different corners of the chamber, from ebony shelves, from caskets with locks of gold or brass or electrum, the sundry accoutrements that were needed for his magic. He drew on the floor the requisite circles, and standing with this uttermost, he lit the turnbulls that contained the prescribed incense, and read aloud the low, narrow scroll of grey vellum, that purple and vermilion rules of ritual that summoned the departed. The fumes of the censer, blue and white and violet, arose in thick clouds and speedily filled the room with ever-writhing, interchanging columns among which the sunlight disappeared, and was succeeded by a wan, unearthly glow, pale as the light of moons, as they ascended from the lath, with preternatural slowness, with unhuman solemnity. The voice of the necromancer went on in a priest-like chant, till the scroll was ended and the last echoes lessened and died out in hollow sepulchral vibrations. Then the colored vapors cleared away, as if the folds of a curtain had been drawn back. But the pale unearthly glow still filled the chamber, and between Milagros and the door, where hung the unicorn's head, there stood the apparition of Nilissa, even as she had stood in the perished years, bending like a wind-blown flower, and smiling with mindful poignancy of youth, fragile, pallid, simply gowned with almond blossoms in her black hair, with eyes that held the new-born azure of vernal heavens. She was all that Milagros had remembered, and his sluggish heart was quickening with old delightful favor as he looked upon her. "Are you Nilissa?" he asked. "The Nilissa whom I loved in myrtle-shaded valley of Morose, in the golden-hearted days that gone with all dead eons to the timeless gulf?" "Yes, I am Nilissa." Her voice was the simple and rippling silver of the voice that had echoed so long in memory. But somehow, as he gazed and listened, there grew a tiny bit of doubt. A doubt no less absurd, that intolerable, but nevertheless insistent. Was this altogether the same Nilissa he had known? Was there not some elusive change, no subtle to be named or defined, had time and the grave not taken something away? An immutable something that his magic could not fully restore? Were the eyes as tender? Was the black hair as lustrous, the form as slim and supple as those of a girl he had recalled? He could not be sure, and the growing doubt was succeeded by leaden dismay, by a grim despondency that choked his heart with ashes. His scrutiny became searching, exigent, and cruel. And momently the phantom was less and less perfect semblance of Nilissa. Momently the lips and brows were less lovely, less subtle in their curves. The slender figure became thin, the tresses look on a common black, and the neck as an ordinary pallor. The soul of Milagros grew sick again with the age and despair and the death of his evanescent hope. He could not no longer in love. He could no longer believe in love or beauty, and even the memory of these things. unmistakable mirage. A thing that might or might not have been. There was nothing left but the shadow and greyness and dust, nothing but the empty, dark, and the cold, and the clutching weight of insufferable weariness and implacable anguish. In accents that were thin and quavering, like the ghost of his former voice, he pronounced the incantation that serves to dismiss a summoned phantom. The form of Vanessa melted upon the air like smoke, and the lunar gleam that had surrounded her was replaced by the last rays of the sun. Milagros turned to the viper and spoke in a tone of melancholy reproof. "Why didn't you warn me?" "Would the warning have availed?" was the counter question. "All knowledge is yours, Milagros, excepting this one thing, and in no other way could you have learned." "What thing?" queried the musician. "I have learned nothing except the vanity of wisdom, the impotence of magic, the nullity of love, and the delusiveness of memory. Tell me, why could I not recall to life the same Nylissim who I knew or thought I knew?" "It was indeed Nylissa whom you summoned and saw," replied the viper. "Your necromancy was potent up to this point, but no necromantic spell could recall for you your own lost youth, or the fervent and guileless heart that loved Nylissa, or the ardent eyes that beheld them then. This, my master, was the thing you had to learn." I hope you enjoyed this telling of The Last Incantation by Clark Ashton Smith. If you enjoyed this, please give in the comments, do the notification things, all of that. I enjoy reading to you. And a special thank you to all my patrons on Patreon who make this possible, because they keep my lights on, me and my kitty cat fed, and my rent paid. If you want to support me, consider going over to patreon.com/shiningnathan for as low to $3 a month. Anyways, I love you. Take care of yourself.